When decorated soldier Ethan Cross thought his war was over, he never imagined it would restart in an upscale restaurant parking lot, where saving a brilliant CEO's life would put his own daughter in the crosshairs of international conspiracies. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, so I can see how far this tale has traveled across the world. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany tables of Le Bernardin, Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishment, where power brokers sealed deals over $30 appetizers and million-dollar handshakes. But in the kitchen, past the gleaming stainless steel and the choreographed chaos of world-class chefs, Ethan Cross moved like a ghost among the living. His calloused hands that once gripped assault rifles in the mountains of Afghanistan, now carried plates of delicate seafood to tables where men in $1,000 suits discussed quarterly earnings. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he'd been Staff Sergeant Ethan Cross, leading reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. Tonight, he was just another invisible worker in the city's machinery, grateful for steady work that let him pick up his daughter from school every day at 3:15. "Table 12 needs their wine refreshed," called Marcus, the head waiter, his voice cutting through the dinner rush. "And Ethan, take the trash out back when you get a chance." Ethan nodded, balancing 3 plates on his left arm, while reaching for the wine bottle with his right. The muscle memory was still there, the ability to carry multiple objects while keeping his hands free for action. Old habits died hard, especially when they'd kept you alive through 3 tours of duty. As he moved through the dining room, fragments of conversation drifted past him like smoke. Stock prices, merger deals, political maneuvering. The language of war just fought with different weapons. He'd learned to tune it out to focus on the simple rhythm of work that paid the bills and kept food on the table for Lily, his daughter. The thought of her sleeping safely in their modest Brooklyn apartment was the only thing that made the endless nights of carrying other people's meals bearable. At 8 years old, she had her mother's eyes and his stubborn determination. Sarah had been gone for 2 years now. Cancer had taken her with the same ruthless efficiency that had claimed so many of his brothers in arms, but Lily carried both their spirits forward. "Excuse me," a voice cut through his reverie. The woman at table 7 was gesturing toward her empty wine glass, her intelligent brown eyes meeting his with unexpected directness. Most patrons looked through him as if he were part of the furniture. "Of course, ma'am." Ethan approached with the bottle, noting details his military training had hardwired into his consciousness. Late 20s designer dress, but practical jewelry, confident posture, but tension in her shoulders. The kind of awareness that came from being watched, hunted, or threatened. "You're very observant," she said quietly as he poured. "Most people in your position don't notice things the way you do." Ethan's hand paused for a fraction of a second before continuing the pour. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't understand. The way you cleared the path to the kitchen exit when you entered the room. How you positioned yourself to watch both the main entrance and the service door while we've been talking. That's not standard busboy training." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was steel underneath the silk. He straightened, meeting her gaze directly for the first time. "You're very observant yourself, ma'am." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Sophia Lane, and you're definitely not just a busboy." Before Ethan could respond, Marcus appeared at his elbow, like a heat-seeking missile. "Mr. Cross, table 12 is still waiting for service, and the kitchen needs those dishes cleared." "Of course." Ethan stepped back from Sophia's table, but not before noticing the way her eyes tracked toward the restaurant's front windows. Following her gaze, he spotted them, 2 men in dark suits lingering near the valet stand, their attention focused on the dining room rather than the street. Professional surveillance. His blood chilled. "Ma'am," he said quietly, Do you have a back exit planned for this evening? Sophia's wineglass froze halfway to her lips. What did you just say? The two men outside. They're not waiting for their car. For a moment, the composed mask slipped and Ethan saw fear flicker across her features. Real, immediate danger. The same look he'd seen in villagers' eyes when Taliban fighters appeared on the horizon. She began, then stopped. I should go. Not through the front. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen. Service exit leads to the alley. Your car? Valet. Silver Tesla license plate ending in 847. Ethan processed this information with the efficiency of a tactical computer. Stay here for exactly 3 minutes. Order dessert, make it look natural. Then excuse yourself to the ladies' room, but head for the kitchen instead. I'll meet you at the service door. Why are you helping me? The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Ethan looked at this woman, clearly successful, obviously intelligent, probably worth more money than he'd see in a lifetime, and saw something that cut through all the class barriers and social divisions. He saw someone who needed help. Because that's what we do, he said simply. Before Sophia could ask what he meant by we, Ethan was moving. He cleared 3 tables with practiced efficiency, all while tracking the positions of the men outside. They hadn't moved, which meant they were waiting for something specific. Probably for Sophia to leave through the main entrance. In the kitchen, he caught Chef Laurent's attention. I need to step out for a few minutes. Personal emergency. The chef, a temperamental Frenchman, who normally erupted at any deviation from routine, took one look at Ethan's expression and nodded. Go. But you owe me an explanation tomorrow. Ethan slipped out the service door into the alley behind the restaurant. The October air carried the scent of rain and automobile exhaust, mixing with the less pleasant aromas of urban waste management. He moved to the corner and peered around the building's edge, confirming what he'd suspected. 3 men, now not 2. The third had positioned himself near the valet stand's back exit. They weren't just surveillance. They were a capture team. His phone buzzed. A text from his babysitter. Lily asleep. She did her homework and practiced piano. See you tomorrow. The reminder of his daughter sent a familiar spike of protective rage through his system. Whatever was happening here, whoever Sophia Lane really was, he couldn't let it spill over into his carefully constructed new life. But he also couldn't walk away from someone who clearly needed help. The service door opened behind him. Sophia emerged, having traded her designer heels for flats she must have carried in her purse. Smart woman. They're positioned to box you in at the valet stand, Ethan reported quietly. 3 men, probably more we can't see. Professional setup. Jesus. Sophia's composure cracked slightly. I knew this might happen, but I thought I had more time. Time for what? To disappear. She looked at him with an expression that was part gratitude, part calculation. You don't have to get involved in this. Just point me toward the nearest subway station and forget we ever met. Ethan studied her face in the dim alley light. What did you do? I invented something that some very powerful people don't want to exist. The simple statement carried the weight of worlds. Ethan had heard similar words before, usually from intelligence assets who'd stumbled onto information that made them liabilities instead of sources. The haunted look in Sophia's eyes was familiar too, the expression of someone who'd realized that knowledge could be a death sentence. Your car's about 60 feet from here, he said, making his decision. Silver Tesla right side of the valet area. Keys probably still with the attendant. You have a plan. I have experience. Ethan pulled off his busboy's apron and rolled it into a tight bundle. When I say move, you go straight for your car. Don't look back, don't stop for anything. If they try to intercept you, get as low as possible and keep moving. What about you? I'll make sure you have a clear path. Sophia grabbed his arm. I don't even know your name. Ethan Cross. He looked at her hand on his sleeve, noting the strength in her grip. And something tells me this isn't goodbye. I hope you're wrong about that. But even as she said it, they both knew she was lying. Ethan moved first, walking casually toward the front of the building, as if heading to his car after a long shift. The surveillance team's attention shifted to him automatically, a mistake that revealed their amateur status despite their professional equipment. True operators would have maintained focus on their primary target. He was 15 feet from the nearest watcher when everything went sideways. The man's hand moved toward his jacket in a motion that was unmistakably reaching for a weapon. In the same instant, Ethan heard a car door slam behind him and turned to see Sophia running toward the valet stand. She jumped early. Panic decision, and now all three men were converging on her position. Time slowed the way it always did when bullets started flying. Ethan's military training kicked in with the smooth efficiency of a well-oiled machine. The nearest man had cleared his weapon, a compact pistol, probably a Glock 19, and was bringing it to bear on Sophia's retreating form. Ethan's busboy apron, still rolled tight in his hands, became a projectile. It struck the gunman's wrist just as he fired, sending the shot wild into the restaurant's brick facade. Before the man could recover, Ethan closed the distance and drove his knee into the attacker's solar plexus, following up with an elbow strike that sent him crumpling to the pavement. The second man was reaching for his own weapon when Ethan grabbed a discarded dinner plate from a nearby bus tub. The porcelain disc flew through the air like a deadly frisbee, catching the gunman across the bridge of his nose with a sickening crack. Blood erupted from his face as he staggered backward, his shot going high and wide. "Sophia, go!" Ethan shouted, but she was already moving. The third man had positioned himself between her and the Tesla, his weapon drawn and ready. Sophia was trapped in the open, nowhere to hide, and Ethan was too far away to help. That's when instinct took over completely. Ethan dove behind a parked car as the third gunman's attention swiveled toward him. Two quick shots spiderwebbed the sedan's rear window, but Ethan was already moving. He grabbed a handful of gravel from the alley entrance and came up, throwing the small stones, striking the gunman's face and causing him to flinch just long enough for Ethan to close the gap. The tackle drove both men to the ground, but the gunman was stronger than he looked. They rolled across the concrete, each fighting for control of the weapon. Ethan got his hand on the man's wrist, preventing him from bringing the gun to bear, but couldn't quite force him to drop it. "Who sent you?" Ethan hissed through gritted teeth as they struggled. The man's response was to drive his free elbow toward Ethan's ribs. The blow connected, sending fire through his midsection, but Ethan had taken worse hits in Kandahar. He twisted the gunman's wrist until bones ground together, finally forcing him to release the weapon. The Glock skittered across the pavement, coming to rest near a storm drain. Ethan was reaching for it when he heard the unmistakable sound of a car engine roaring to life. Sophia had made it to her Tesla. The electric vehicle's near-silent motor was masked by the screech of tires as she accelerated out of the valet area. Smart woman. But as Ethan watched her disappear into Manhattan traffic, he couldn't shake the feeling that running away was only going to delay the inevitable. The gunman beneath him was trying to reach something in his jacket backup weapon or communication device. Ethan didn't give him the chance to find out. A precise strike to the carotid artery sent the man into unconsciousness, his body going limp against the concrete. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the police, which meant Ethan had maybe 2 minutes before this became a very complicated conversation about why a busboy was unconscious, surrounded by 3 armed men. He quickly patted down the attackers, looking for identification or anything that might reveal who they were working for. No wallets, no IDs, but each man carried identical tactical knives and communication earpieces. Professional equipment for professional operators. The first man was starting to regain consciousness, blood streaming from his broken nose. Ethan knelt beside him. "Who's paying you?" he asked quietly. The man's eyes focused on Ethan's face, and what he saw there made him try to scoot backward across the pavement. We don't. Wrong answer. Ethan's voice carried the quiet menace of someone who'd interrogated Taliban commanders in mountain caves. "Sophia Lane. Why do you want her?" "The tech," the man gasped. "The energy tech. Our employer. They can't let it go public." "Who's your employer?" The man's eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. "Your military. Special operations." "Was. Shit." The gunman struggled to sit up. "You have no idea what you just walked into, soldier. This isn't some random mugging. That woman has something that could change everything, and there are people who'll kill anyone to stop her." The sirens were getting closer. Ethan could see flashing lights reflecting off the buildings at the end of the block. "What kind of tech?" he pressed. "Clean energy. Revolutionary stuff. Worth billions to whoever controls it, and worth more to keep it buried." The man spat blood onto the concrete. "You saved her tonight, but tomorrow they'll just send more of us, and eventually they'll find out who you are. Then they'll come for your family too." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "My family isn't part of this." "They are now." The gunman's smile was cold and knowing. "The moment you got involved, you made them part of it. That's how these people work. They don't just eliminate threats, they eliminate everything connected to threats." Police cars rounded the corner, their searchlights cutting through the evening shadows. Ethan had seconds to decide stay and try to explain what had happened, or disappear and hope this whole nightmare would go away on its own. The gunman's words echoed in his mind. "They'll come for your family too." Lily. Sleeping peacefully in their apartment, trusting that Daddy would always keep her safe. Ethan stood and melted back into the alley shadows, leaving the three attackers for the police to sort out. As he moved through the maze of service roads and emergency exits that connected Manhattan's restaurant district, his mind was already racing ahead to the next problem. He'd saved Sophia Lane's life tonight, but in doing so, he might have condemned his own daughter to the same danger that was hunting her. The irony was bitter as month-old coffee in trying to help someone escape their war, he'd dragged his family into a new one. By the time he reached the subway station 6 blocks away, Ethan Cross, the busboy, had vanished completely. In his place was Staff Sergeant Cross, analyzing threats and calculating responses with the cold efficiency that had kept his squad alive through some of the worst fighting in Afghanistan. The war he'd thought he'd left behind had found him after all. But this time, the stakes weren't just his own life. They were everything he had left to live for. As the northbound train carried him toward Brooklyn, and the sleeping daughter, who represented his entire world, Ethan began planning for a battle he'd never wanted to fight. Because if Sophia Lane's enemies thought they could threaten his family to get to her, they were about to learn what happened when someone cornered a soldier who had nothing left to lose except the one thing that mattered most. The train's wheels clicked against the tracks in a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Tick, 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 time running out before ordinary life became a luxury he could no longer afford. Outside the windows, Manhattan's glittering skyline blurred past each light, representing lives that would continue unchanged while his world shifted on its axis. Tomorrow, he'd have to explain to Lily why they might need to leave the life they'd built together. Tomorrow, he'd have to figure out how to protect her from enemies he didn't understand, fighting a war over technology he couldn't comprehend. But tonight, for just a few more minutes, he could sit in the subway car and pretend he was still just a single father coming home from work, carrying nothing more dangerous than the memory of clearing tables and serving wine to people whose biggest worry was whether their stock portfolio would survive the next quarterly report. The illusion lasted until his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for tonight. We need to talk. SL." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. But he knew it was already too late. The conversation had started the moment he'd decided to help her, and it wouldn't end until one side or the other was completely destroyed. As the train pulled into his station, Ethan Cross made a silent promise to his sleeping daughter. Whatever came next, whatever forces were arrayed against them, she would be protected. He'd lost Sarah to an enemy he couldn't fight, but he wouldn't lose Lily to enemies he could. The war was coming whether he wanted it or not. The only question now was whether he could win it before it cost him everything he'd fought so hard to build. Walking through the quiet Brooklyn streets toward home, Ethan felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like tactical gear. Some battles chose their soldiers. This one had chosen him, and he intended to make sure it regretted the decision. The subway car's fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Ethan made his way through the quiet Brooklyn neighborhoods, each step carrying him further from the violence he'd left behind and closer to the peaceful apartment where his daughter slept. But peace, he was beginning to realize, was just another word for the calm before the storm. His building's lobby smelled like disinfectant and old carpet, the familiar sense of working-class New York that had become home over the past 6 months. Mrs. Chen from 3B was checking her mailbox, probably returning from her night shift at the hospital. She nodded at him with the tired solidarity of people who understood what it meant to work multiple jobs just to stay afloat. "Long night?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Something like that." Ethan managed a smile that felt like wearing someone else's face. "How's your grandson? Getting too smart for his own good. Reminds me of your Lily." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "That little girl of yours is special, Mr. Cross. Don't let the world make her forget it." The words hit harder than they should have, carrying an unintended prophecy that made Ethan's chest tighten. "I won't," he promised, meaning it more than she could possibly know. The elevator groaned its way to the 4th floor, each mechanical sound amplified in the late-night quiet. Outside apartment 4C, Ethan paused with his key in the lock, listening for any sign that the violence from earlier had somehow followed him home. But there was only silence broken by the distant hum of the building's ancient heating system. He opened the door to find Maria, his babysitter, asleep on the couch, with her textbooks spread across the coffee table. Pre-med at Brooklyn College, working her way through school one babysitting job at a time. She reminded him of Sarah at that age, determined, brilliant, and utterly convinced she could save the world through sheer force of will. "Maria," he whispered gently, shaking her shoulder. She startled awake, immediately alert, in the way of people who'd grown up in neighborhoods where staying aware meant staying alive. "Mr. Cross, I'm sorry, I was just studying while Lily slept and I must have dozed off." "It's fine. How was she tonight?" "Perfect as always. She practiced piano for an hour, finished her math homework without any help, and only asked for 3 bedtime stories instead of her usual 5. Maria gathered her books with practiced efficiency. "She asked when you'd be home, though. I think she misses having dinner with you." Guilt twisted in Ethan's stomach like shrapnel. The restaurant job paid better than most positions available to someone with his particular skill set, and no formal education beyond high school, but it meant missing the small moments that made up the architecture of his daughter's childhood. "I'll try to get an earlier shift," he said, knowing it was a promise he might not be able to keep, especially if the events of tonight led where he suspected they would. After Maria left, Ethan stood in the doorway of Lily's room watching his daughter sleep. 8 years old, with Sarah's delicate features and his own stubborn jawline. She slept like her mother had completely abandoned to rest, trusting the world to keep her safe while she dreamed. The sight of her small form under the covers, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Sarah had given her for her 6th birthday, made Ethan's resolve crystallize into something harder than steel. Whatever was coming, whoever these people were who'd tried to take Sophia Lane, they would not touch his daughter. Not while he drew breath. His phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "They'll come for you now. We need to meet. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Central Park, Sheep Meadow. Come alone." Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, "Who says I'm coming at all?" The response came immediately. "Because you're a good man who saved someone tonight, and good men don't walk away when innocent people are in danger. Also because they already know who you are." The last line sent ice through his veins. He deleted the conversation and turned off the phone, but the damage was done. Sophia Lane was right. He was involved now, whether he wanted to be or not. The question was how deep the water would get before he found solid ground again. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams of distant gunfire and the sound of his daughter calling his name. When dawn finally painted the windows gray, Ethan was already awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the morning paper. The restaurant incident had made the metro section 3 men injured in apparent robbery gone wrong, but there was no mention of Sophia Lane or any details that might connect the attack to something larger. Professional cleanup. Someone with influence had made sure the story stayed small and the questions stayed unasked. "Daddy." Lily's voice floated from the hallway, still thick with sleep. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with planets and rockets that she'd picked out after declaring her intention to become an astronaut engineer veterinarian when she grew up. "Morning, sweetheart." Ethan folded the newspaper and gave her his full attention. "Sleep well." "I had a weird dream." Lily climbed into the chair across from him, her bare feet swinging well above the floor. "There were bad men trying to hurt people, but you stopped them. Then we had to go on a big adventure to keep everyone safe." The accuracy of her dream made Ethan's blood run cold, but he kept his expression neutral. Children picked up on more than adults gave them credit for, and Lily had always been especially perceptive. "That sounds like quite an adventure," he said carefully. "But it was just a dream, baby. Nobody's getting hurt, and we're not going anywhere." Lily studied his face with the intensity of someone much older than 8. "You look tired, Daddy, and sad. Are you okay?" The simple question nearly broke him. How did you explain to a child that the careful life you'd built together might be crumbling? How did you tell someone who trusted you completely that you might not be able to keep her safe? "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking about work stuff." He reached across the table to brush a strand of hair from her face. "What do you want for breakfast?" "Pancakes. Can we make them shaped like animals again?" For the next hour, Ethan lost himself in the simple ritual of making breakfast with his daughter. Lily narrated the process with the enthusiasm of a cooking show host, explaining to their imaginary television audience why elephant-shaped pancakes required exactly 3 chocolate chips for proper facial features. Her laughter filled the small kitchen, temporarily driving away the shadows that had followed him home from Manhattan. But even as he flipped pancakes and listened to Lily's stories about her friend Emma's new pet hamster, part of his mind was already planning. If they had to leave and the rational part of him suspected they would, where could they go? How much money did he have saved? What supplies would they need? The military training never really left. It just went dormant until circumstances required it to surface again. At 9:30, Ethan walked Lily to school, hyper-aware of every person on the street, every car that passed too slowly, every face that appeared more than once. The 3-block journey felt like a patrol through hostile Taos territory, but nothing seemed out of place. Just parents dropping off kids, commuters hurrying to catch trains, and the ordinary bustle of a neighborhood going about its morning routine. "Daddy, you're squeezing my hand too tight," Lily said, as they approached PS 234's front entrance. "Sorry, baby." He loosened his grip, but didn't let go completely. "Listen, if anyone you don't know tries to talk to you today, you go straight to Mrs. Henderson, okay? Don't talk to strangers, don't go anywhere with anyone except me, or someone I've specifically told you about." Lily's forehead wrinkled with concern. "Is something wrong?" "No, sweetheart. I just want to make sure you're always safe." He knelt down to her level, looking directly into eyes that were so much like her mother's, it sometimes took his breath away. "You're the most important thing in my world, Lily. Everything I do is to keep you safe and happy." "I know, Daddy." She threw her arms around his neck with the absolute faith that only children possessed. "I love you too." Watching her disappear through the school's front doors was one of the hardest things Ethan had ever done. Every instinct screamed at him to grab her hand and run to disappear into the vastness of America where they could start over somewhere safe. But running without understanding the threat would only delay the inevitable. He needed information, and Sophia Lane was the only source he had. The subway ride to Manhattan felt like traveling backward through time, each stop taking him further from the simple life he'd built as a single father, and closer to the warrior he'd been before Lily made him want to be something else. By the time he emerged from the 86th Street station, Staff Sergeant Cross was fully awake beneath the civilian facade. Central Park in October was a masterpiece of autumn colors, tourists and locals sharing the paths in the democracy of public space. Sheep Meadow stretched out like a green carpet bordered by the skeletal remains of trees preparing for winter. Ethan arrived 15 minutes early, using the time to scout potential threats and escape routes. Old habits. Sophia Lane appeared at exactly 10 o'clock, walking across the grass with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to being in control. She'd traded the elegant dinner dress for dark jeans and a leather jacket, but she still carried herself like a woman who regularly made decisions that affected thousands of people. As she drew closer, Ethan could see the toll of the previous night's events in the shadows under her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. "You came," she said, settling onto the bench beside him. "Seemed like I didn't have much choice." Ethan kept his eyes on the meadow, tracking the movement of joggers and dog walkers. "Your people were right about one thing. I am a good man. Stupid, apparently, but good." "Not stupid. Brave." Sophia followed his gaze, noting the way he cataloged potential threats. "How long were you active duty?" 3 tours in Afghanistan. Got out 6 months ago when my wife died and I realized I had a daughter to raise." The words came out more bitter than he'd intended. Funny how civilian life keeps finding ways to put you back in the field. "I'm sorry about your wife. So am I." Ethan finally looked at her, noting the genuine sympathy in her expression. "Now tell me why 3 professional operators tried to kidnap you last night, and why that means my 8-year-old daughter might be in danger." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, weighing words with the care of someone who understood that information could be a weapon. "What do you know about renewable energy? Solar panels, wind turbines, the usual. Why?" The usual is about to become obsolete. She pulled a tablet from her bag, calling up a series of technical diagrams that meant nothing to Ethan. My company Lane Dynamics has developed a new form of energy storage that could revolutionize how we power everything from smartphones to cities. And that's worth killing for. It's worth trillions to whoever controls it, and worth even more to certain people to make sure nobody controls it. Sophia's finger traced patterns on the tablet screen. Imagine a battery the size of a briefcase that could power your entire apartment building for a month. Imagine electric cars that could drive across the country without stopping to charge. Imagine making fossil fuels as obsolete as whale oil. Ethan was beginning to understand the scope of what he'd stumbled into. How many people want this technology? Everyone. Foreign governments, domestic energy companies, private military contractors, environmental groups, venture capitalists. Basically anyone with enough money to hire people like the ones who came after me last night. Sophia closed the tablet and met his eyes. The problem is that some of those people don't want the technology to exist at all. They'd rather kill everyone involved than let it reach the market. Why come to me? You must have security lawyers, people who know how to handle this kind of thing. I did. My head of security disappeared 3 days ago. My lawyer's office was broken into Tuesday night, and yesterday morning I found a tracking device on my car. Sophia's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd been running on adrenaline and caffeine for too long. You saved my life last night, Ethan. But more than that, you saw the threat before I did. That takes training and experience. I'm a busboy. You're a soldier. A good one from what I could see. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I need someone I can trust. Someone who isn't already compromised. Someone who understands that this is about more than just money. Ethan thought about Lily sitting in her third-grade classroom, learning about multiplication tables and state capitals, blissfully unaware that her father was being recruited for a war she didn't even know existed. What makes you think you can trust me? Because you have something to lose. People with something to lose fight harder to protect it. Sophia's smile was sad and knowing. Also because you're here instead of running. Most people would have taken their family and disappeared after last night. Maybe I should have. Maybe. But you didn't, which means some part of you understands that running won't solve this. They'll keep coming and eventually they'll find you. The only way to end this is to finish it. A jogger passed their bench close enough that Ethan could smell his cologne and hear the rhythm of his breathing. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that history might be pivoting around a conversation happening 20 feet away from their morning run. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me figure out who's behind the attacks. Help me protect the technology long enough to get it to market. Help me stay alive until this is over. Sophia's voice carried the weight of desperation, carefully controlled. In exchange, I'll make sure you and your daughter are protected. New identities if necessary, relocation assistance, enough money to start over anywhere in the world. And if I say no, then I'll understand completely, and I'll do my best to make sure nothing I do puts your family at risk. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But Ethan, these people don't leave loose ends. Last night you became part of this story whether we like it or not. The truth of it settled over him like the weight of tactical gear. He'd saved one person's life and potentially condemned his daughter to the same danger he'd rescued Sophia from. The mathematics of it were brutal but clear. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this whole thing isn't some elaborate setup? Sophia reached into her jacket pocket, and Ethan's hand moved instinctively toward where his sidearm would have been if he were still carrying one. She noticed the motion and slowly withdrew her hand, holding a photograph. This is Dr. James Morrison. He was my research partner for 3 years, helped develop the core technology. The photo showed a man in his 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. They found his body in his apartment Tuesday morning. Apparent suicide, according to the police report. She handed him a second photograph, this one showing the same man but clearly taken through a telephoto lens. He was entering what looked like a warehouse accompanied by 2 men in suits. This was taken 6 hours before his supposed suicide. James was terrified of heights, wouldn't even go on his apartment building's fire escape. But somehow he managed to throw himself off his roof. Sophia's voice hardened. They're not just trying to steal the technology, Ethan. They're eliminating everyone who understands it. The photographs painted a picture that Ethan recognized from his time in Afghanistan. Systematic elimination of assets, the clinical efficiency of people who killed for strategic, rather than personal reasons. Professional work. Who took this surveillance photo? A private investigator I hired when James first told me he was being followed. Same investigator who disappeared 3 days ago. Sophia tucked the photos back into her jacket. I'm running out of allies, Ethan, and time. A distant siren wailed somewhere in the city. Emergency services rushing toward some crisis that probably had nothing to do with international conspiracies or revolutionary technology. The sound reminded Ethan of how thin the veneer of civilization really was, how quickly ordinary life could collapse into chaos when the wrong people decided to act. I need to think about this. Of course. But while you're thinking, remember that your daughter goes to PS 234. She's in Mrs. Rodriguez's 3rd grade class, and she walks home with Emma Chen every Tuesday when you have to work late. Sophia's voice was gentle, but the implications were clear. I'm not threatening you, Ethan. I'm pointing out that they already know everything they need to know about your life. The casual knowledge of his daughter's routine sent ice through Ethan's veins. How do you know all that? Because I spent last night learning everything I could about the man who saved my life. I needed to know if you could be trusted. She stood brushing grass from her jeans. I'm staying at the Meridian Hotel under the name Sarah Winters, room 1247. When you decide, find me there. And if I decide this is too dangerous for my family, then I'll respect that decision and do everything I can to make sure my problems don't become yours. Sophia started to walk away, then turned back. But Ethan, if these people are willing to kill a brilliant scientist just to keep this technology buried, what do you think they'll do to a former soldier who can identify 3 of their operatives? She left him sitting on the bench with that thought, walking back across the meadow, with the same purposeful stride she'd arrived with. Ethan watched her go, his mind already racing through possibilities and contingencies. Around him, Central Park continued its normal rhythm. Children playing couples holding hands. Old men feeding pigeons while he sat in the center of it all and tried to decide whether to fight or run. His phone buzzed with a text from the school. Lily has a slight fever. Please come pick her up at your earliest convenience. Panic flooded his system like ice water. Ethan was moving before he'd consciously decided to stand his legs, carrying him toward the subway station while his mind calculated travel time and threat possibilities. It could be nothing. Kids got sick all the time, especially when the seasons changed. But after everything Sophia had told him, especially her casual knowledge of Lily's routine, every deviation from normal felt like a potential attack. The subway ride back to Brooklyn lasted forever and no time at all. Ethan found himself checking his phone obsessively, looking for updates from the school or signs that something had gone wrong. Other passengers gave him nervous glances, picking up on the tension radiating from him like heat from a furnace. PS 234 looked exactly the same as it had 3 hours earlier, but Ethan approached it like a potential combat zone. He scanned the perimeter for unusual vehicles, unfamiliar faces, anything that might suggest surveillance or threat. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean anything. Professional operators were good at being invisible. The school nurse, Mrs. Patterson, met him in the main office with her usual efficient kindness. "Mr. Cross, thank you for coming so quickly. Lily's temperature is 101.2, not dangerous, but high enough that we need to send her home according to district policy. Where is she now?" "Resting in my office. She's been asking for you since I took her temperature." Mrs. Patterson led him down the familiar hallway past bulletin boards covered with student artwork and motivational posters. "Has she been feeling unwell this morning?" "Not that I noticed." Ethan tried to remember if there had been any signs he'd missed in his distraction over the meeting with Sophia. She seemed fine at breakfast. Sometimes these things come on quickly with children. I'd recommend keeping her home tomorrow as well, just to be safe. They reached the nurse's office to find Lily curled up on the small cot, looking smaller and more fragile than Ethan had ever seen her. Her face was flushed with fever, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Daddy, I don't feel good." Her voice was smaller than usual, carrying the particular vulnerability that only came with being 8 years old and sick. "I know, sweetheart. We're going to go home and get you feeling better." Ethan knelt beside the cot, pressing his hand to her forehead. She was definitely warm, but not dangerously so. "What hurts?" "My head and my tummy, and I'm really tired." Lily sat up slowly, leaning against him with the absolute trust that never failed to humble him. "Can we watch movies today?" "All the movies you want." He helped her into her jacket, noting the way she moved, careful and deliberate, the way people moved when their bodies felt foreign to them. "Mrs. Patterson, has anyone else been sick today? Any kind of outbreak or unusual symptoms?" "Not that I'm aware of. Sometimes these seasonal bugs just hit one child at a time." The nurse's expression showed mild concern at his intensity. "Is there something specific you're worried about, Mr. Cross?" Ethan almost laughed at the question. Where would he start? International conspiracies, professional killers. The possibility that someone had deliberately made his daughter sick to force him into a vulnerable position. Instead, he just shook his head. "Just want to make sure she's okay." The walk home took twice as long as usual, with Lily needing to stop and rest every few blocks. By the time they reached their building, she was leaning heavily against him, her small hand hot in his. Mrs. Chen was in the lobby again, returning from her day shift at the hospital. "Little Lily, what's wrong, sweetheart?" Her maternal instincts kicked in immediately as she saw the child's flushed face. "She's got a fever. School sent her home." Ethan was grateful for the neighbor's concern, but every moment spent in public felt like exposure to potential threats. "You want me to take a look at her? I've got some pediatric experience." Mrs. Chen's offer was genuine, but Ethan needed to get Lily upstairs where he could control the environment. "Thanks, but I think she just needs rest. Maybe some soup later if she's up for it." In the apartment, Ethan got Lily settled on the couch with her favorite blanket and a cup of lukewarm tea. She dozed fitfully, waking every hour or so to ask for water or complain about her headache. By mid-afternoon, her fever had broken, and she was asking about lunch, which Ethan took as a good sign. "Feeling better, baby?" "A little. My head doesn't hurt as much." Lily sat up slowly, testing her balance. "Daddy, why did you ask Mrs. Patterson about other kids being sick?" The question caught him off guard. Even running a fever, his daughter was sharp enough to pick up on details that concerned her. "Just wanted to make sure you didn't catch something really serious. You've been acting weird since last night. When you came home from work, you looked like you did after Mommy got sick, all worried and sad." Lily's voice was matter-of-fact. but her eyes held the kind of insight that children developed when they'd learned too young that the adults in their lives weren't invulnerable. Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. How did you explain to an 8-year-old that the safety she'd taken for granted might be an illusion? How did you prepare a child for the possibility that their life might change overnight without terrifying them? Sometimes grown-ups have to worry about things that kids don't need to think about, he said finally. That's part of being a daddy, keeping the worries so you don't have to. But what if something happens to you? Who's going to keep my worries then? The question hit him like a physical blow. It was exactly what Sarah would have asked, the same direct approach to uncomfortable truths that had made him fall in love with her mother. Lily had inherited more than just Sarah's eyes. Nothing's going to happen to me, sweetheart. I promise. The words felt like a lie even as he said them, but some promises had to be made even when you couldn't guarantee you could keep them. That's what Mommy said too. The simple statement hung in the air between them, carrying all the weight of loss and the terrible knowledge that the people you loved most could disappear without warning. Ethan pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd already lost too much. I'm not going anywhere, Lily. Whatever happens, whatever we have to do, we're going to be okay. I promise you that. She nodded against his chest, but he could feel the tension in her small body. Children knew when the adults around them were afraid, even when those adults tried to hide it. Lily had learned that lesson when cancer took her mother, and now she was learning it again as danger circled their carefully constructed new life. That evening, after Lily had eaten some soup and fallen asleep watching cartoons, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and tried to make sense of his options. On one side was the life he'd built, modest but safe, ordinary but precious. On the other side was the war that Sophia Lane was offering him, with all its dangers and unknowns. But as he thought about the casual way she'd mentioned Lily's school routine, about the professional efficiency of the men who'd tried to take her, about the scientist who'd supposedly committed suicide, Ethan realized the choice had already been made for him. The war was coming, whether he fought it or not. The only question was whether he'd meet it on his terms or theirs. His phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Your daughter's fever broke around 3 p.m. Seasonal virus, nothing serious. But next time we might not be so gentle. The blood drained from Ethan's face as the implications sank in. They hadn't just been watching Lily, they'd done something to her. Made her sick to demonstrate their reach, their power, their willingness to hurt a child, to make a point. He deleted the message and powered off the phone, then went to check on his sleeping daughter. She looked peaceful now, her breathing steady and her fever completely gone. But the knowledge that someone had deliberately made her sick, had touched her with their violence even in this small way, filled him with a rage that felt like swallowing molten metal. Tomorrow he would find Sophia Lane and accept her offer. Not because he believed in her technology or trusted her completely, but because the alternative was waiting for these people to decide when and how to escalate their threats against his family. Standing in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep in the safe cocoon of their modest apartment, Ethan Cross made a different kind of promise than the one he'd made earlier. This one wasn't about staying safe or avoiding trouble. This one was about making sure that anyone who threatened his daughter learned exactly what happened when they pushed a soldier too far. The war was already here. Now it was time to start fighting back. The morning came too early and not soon enough. Ethan had spent the night alternating between checking on Lily's breathing and staring out the apartment windows, watching for movements that didn't belong to the rhythm of his neighborhood. Every car that lingered too long, every pedestrian who passed twice, every shadow that shifted wrong, became a potential threat in his mind. By 6 a.m., he'd made his decision 3 times over, but the weight of it still sat in his chest like undigested lead. Mrs. Chen knocked on the door at 7:30, having volunteered to watch Lily while he handled what he'd vaguely described as urgent business. The older woman took one look at his face and asked no questions, just gathered Lily into her arms with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd raised children of her own. "Daddy has to go take care of some work things," Ethan explained to his daughter, who was already feeling well enough to protest being left behind. "Mrs. Chen is going to make you her special congee, remember the kind with the little fish crackers? Can't I come with you? I feel much better now." Lily's voice carried the particular wheedling tone that meant she sensed something important was happening and didn't want to be excluded from it. "Not today, sweetheart. But I'll be back before dinner and maybe we can order pizza and watch that movie about the princess who becomes an engineer." The promise felt hollow in his mouth, carrying the weight of all the uncertainties ahead of him. Lily studied his face with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read adult expressions for signs of approaching loss. "You look like you did before you told me about Mommy being really sick." The observation hit him like a punch to the solar plexus. "This is different, baby. I'm just going to help someone with a problem, and then everything will be back to normal. Promise? I promise." Another lie that might become truth if he fought hard enough to make it so. The Meridian Hotel occupied 12 floors of glass and steel in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place where business travelers paid premium prices for the illusion of luxury. Ethan approached it like infiltrating an enemy stronghold, noting sightlines, exit routes, and the subtle signs that marked professional security versus rent-a-cop window dressing. The lobby buzzed with the controlled chaos of commerce executives rushing to meetings, tourists consulting guidebooks, staff moving with the practiced invisibility of service workers. Ethan recognized the breed immediately, having been one of them until yesterday. People who existed in the margins of other people's important lives, essential but unseen. Room 1247 was on the 12th floor, accessible by 2 elevators and 1 stairwell. Ethan took the stairs partly for security, and partly because the physical exertion helped burn off some of the nervous energy that had been building since he'd read that text about Lily's fever. By the time he reached the 12th floor, his breathing was steady and his mind was clear. He knocked on the door in the pattern Sophia had specified in her latest message: 2 short, 1 long, 2 short. Military communication habits died hard, apparently. The door opened to reveal Sophia Lane looking like she'd slept about as well as he had. Her hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail, and she'd traded her casual clothes for dark slacks and a fitted blazer that suggested she was ready for serious business. "You came," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "Didn't seem like I had much choice after last night." Ethan swept the room with his eyes automatically cataloging potential weapons escape routes and hiding places. Standard hotel layout, but someone had been here before him. The furniture was arranged differently than hotel housekeeping would have left it positioned to provide clear sight lines to both the door and the windows. "You brought backup," he observed. "Insurance." Sophia gestured toward the bathroom, where Ethan could now make out the subtle sounds of someone trying to be quiet. "I hope you don't mind, but after everything that's happened, I thought it would be wise to have additional security present." "Depends on who your insurance is." The bathroom door opened, and a woman emerged, who immediately commanded attention, despite her unremarkable appearance. Medium height, brown hair clothes that could have belonged to any office worker in Manhattan. But her eyes held the same predatory alertness that Ethan recognized in his own reflection, and she moved with the economical grace of someone trained to kill efficiently. "Ethan Cross, meet Angela Murphy," Sophia said. "Former CIA, currently freelance security consultation. She's been helping me stay ahead of our mutual friends since this whole thing started." Angela extended her hand with a smile that was all professional courtesy and no warmth. Staff Sergeant Cross, your reputation precedes you. My reputation? Ethan shook her hand, noting the calluses that spoke of extensive weapons training. I've been a civilian for 6 months. Civilian is a state of mind, Angela replied. Some people never really make the transition. Your service record suggests you're one of them. You've been reading my service record. We've been reading everything we could find about you since last night, Sophia interjected. Afghanistan, 3 tours, multiple commendations for valor leadership and tactical innovation. Expert marksman, advanced combat training, fluent in Pashto and basic Arabic. Honorable discharge following the death of your spouse, primary custody of 1 minor child. Hearing his life reduced to a collection of facts and statistics made Ethan feel exposed in ways that enemy fire never had. Anything else I should know that you know? We know you saved Sophia's life without hesitation, despite having no idea what you were walking into, Angela said. We know you could have disappeared after that and probably stayed safe. And we know someone made your daughter sick yesterday to demonstrate their reach. The casual mention of Lily's deliberate poisoning sent ice through Ethan's veins. How do you know about that? Because they sent us the same message they sent you, Sophia said quietly, along with photos of her school, her walking route home, and a very detailed schedule of her daily activities. They wanted to make sure we understood that bringing you in put her at risk. So why did you still ask me to come? Because they're going to kill her anyway. Angela's voice was matter-of-fact, the kind of brutal honesty that military personnel used when civilians needed to understand the true stakes of a situation. Along with you, me Sophia, and anyone else who knows about this technology. The only question is whether it happens now or later. The hotel room's climate control system hummed quietly in the background, a mundane sound that seemed absurdly normal in the context of discussing his daughter's murder. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its daily rhythm, millions of people going about their lives unaware that the future of global energy was being decided in a hotel room 12 floors above the street. Tell me about the technology, Ethan said finally. Not the sales pitch version, the real version. Sophia moved to a laptop computer that had been set up on the room's small desk. The screen showed a 3-dimensional molecular diagram that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Energy storage has been the holy grail of renewable technology for decades. Solar panels and wind turbines can generate power, but storing that power efficiently has always been the bottleneck. Until now, Angela added. Until now, Sophia confirmed. What you're looking at is a new form of crystalline matrix that can store electrical energy at the molecular level. A battery the size of a cell phone that could power a house for a week. A unit the size of a car engine that could run a small city for months. Ethan studied the diagram, trying to wrap his mind around the implications. How is that possible? It's complicated quantum mechanics, but the basic principle involves using carbon nanotube structures to create incredibly dense energy storage at the atomic level. Sophia's fingers danced across the keyboard, bringing up manufacturing specifications and cost projections. We're talking about energy density that's orders of magnitude beyond anything currently available. And someone wants to kill you to stop this from reaching the market. Multiple someones, Angela corrected. We've identified at least 6 different organizations with motives to either steal or bury this technology. Oil companies who would lose trillions in stranded assets. Foreign governments who rely on energy exports for economic stability. Defense contractors who profit from resource conflicts. Even some environmental groups who think the technology is too dangerous to exist. Why would environmental groups want to stop clean energy? Because this isn't just clean energy, Sophia said. It's unlimited energy, and unlimited anything can be dangerous in the wrong hands. Imagine terrorists with access to power sources that could run entire operations indefinitely. Imagine authoritarian governments with energy independence that makes them immune to international pressure. The complexity of the situation was beginning to crystallize in Ethan's mind. This wasn't just about corporate espionage or even international competition. This was about fundamentally altering the balance of global power. And there were powerful interests on all sides who would kill to control that process. "Where does my daughter fit into all this?" "She doesn't," Angela said bluntly. "But they're using her as leverage to control you, which means they see you as either an asset they want to recruit or a threat they need to eliminate." "Based on last night, I'd say it's the latter," Sophia added. "You proved you're capable of disrupting their operations, which makes you dangerous to their plans." Ethan walked to the window, looking down at the street 12 stories below. Ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that their future was being shaped by conversations like this one. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Help us identify who's behind the attacks," Sophia said. "The people who tried to take me weren't independent operators. They were hired muscle, which means someone with serious resources is coordinating this whole thing." "We need to find the source," Angela continued, "and either neutralize the threat or expose it publicly enough that killing us becomes counterproductive. And in the meantime, we keep you and your daughter alive while we work." Sophia closed the laptop and turned to face him directly. "I meant what I said about protection and relocation assistance. Whatever it takes to keep your family safe." Ethan thought about Lily, probably sitting in Mrs. Chen's apartment right now working on homework, and completely unaware that her father was deciding whether to go to war on her behalf. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than any equipment he'd carried in Afghanistan. "What's the timeline?" "The technology goes public in 6 days, Sophia said. "Patent filings, press conference, demonstration for potential investors. Once it's out there, killing us becomes pointless because the information will be in too many hands to suppress. 6 days to stay alive and figure out who wants us dead," Angela summarized. "Should be interesting." A knock on the door interrupted the conversation, 3 quick raps followed by 2 more. Angela's hand moved instinctively toward her jacket, and Ethan found himself calculating angles and distances with the automatic precision of someone who'd survived too many ambushes to take any unexpected sound lightly. "Expecting someone?" he asked. "Room service," Sophia said, but her voice carried uncertainty. "I ordered coffee and breakfast about an hour ago." Angela moved to the door, checking the peephole before opening it on the security chain. "ID, please." A young voice responded from the hallway. "Hotel catering, ma'am. I have a breakfast order for room 1247. Through the narrow gap, Ethan could see a portion of a hotel uniform and what appeared to be a service cart. Standard delivery, but something about the situation felt wrong. The timing was too convenient, and the voice sounded rehearsed. "Slide the receipt under the door," Angela instructed. "Ma'am, I need to bring the cart inside to set up the service. Hotel policy." Red flags started going off in Ethan's mind. He'd seen enough false flag operations to recognize the pattern. Create a plausible reason to gain access, then exploit that access to achieve your real objective. "Change of plans," he said quietly. "We don't need the service after all." "Sir, I've already prepared everything. If you could just—" Angela shut the door and engaged the deadbolt. "Time to go." The next 60 seconds unfolded with the compressed intensity of combat. Angela grabbed a small duffel bag from the closet, while Sophia packed the laptop and research materials into a briefcase. Ethan moved to the window looking for alternative exit routes. Fire escape, north side of the building, Angela replied. But if they're professional, they'll have that covered too. The sound of voices in the hallway was getting louder, and Ethan could make out at least 3 different speakers. Whatever was happening, it involved more than one fake room service attendant. Service elevator, Sophia suggested. That's how they got up here without being seen, Angela said. They'll have someone waiting there too. A new sound joined the conversation in the hallway, the distinctive beep of an electronic key card being used. Someone was overriding the hotel's security system, gaining access to the room whether they were invited or not. Window, Ethan decided. Fire escape or not, it's our best option. The hotel room window opened onto a narrow ledge that ran along the building's exterior, connecting to a fire escape platform about 20 feet to the right. 12 stories of empty air yawned below them, but Ethan had navigated worse terrain under hostile fire. Ladies first, he said, helping Sophia climb through the window onto the ledge. I hate heights, she muttered, but she moved with the determination of someone who understood that fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Angela followed her movements smooth and confident, despite the briefcase slung across her shoulder. Military training, she explained when she saw Ethan's surprised expression. Some skills transfer to civilian life better than others. The hotel room door opened just as Ethan climbed through the window, pulling it closed behind him. Through the glass, he could see 3 figures entering the room, with the systematic efficiency of a professional search team. They weren't hotel employees. Move, he whispered, and the 3 of them began making their way along the ledge toward the fire escape. 12 stories above Manhattan's busy streets, with nothing but a 6-inch concrete shelf between them and certain death. Ethan found himself thinking about Lily's reaction when he'd promised to be home for dinner. Children believed in their parents' invincibility with the absolute faith that made them simultaneously precious and terrifying to protect. There, Angela pointed toward the fire escape platform. Another 10 feet. The platform looked solid enough, though the entire fire escape structure swayed slightly in the wind that seemed much stronger at this height. Through the windows of adjacent rooms, Ethan could see hotel guests going about their morning routines, completely unaware of the drama unfolding just outside their windows. Sophia reached the platform first, immediately beginning her descent down the metal stairs. Angela followed, then Ethan, who paused long enough to look back at room 1247. The figures inside were systematic in their search, clearly looking for something specific. Not random thieves or even ordinary industrial espionage. Military precision, he murmured to himself. What? Angela called from below. Nothing. Keep moving. The fire escape descended through a maze of building services, air conditioning units, maintenance platforms, and service access points that created a vertical obstacle course. At the 8th floor, Angela stopped suddenly. Problem, she whispered. Below them on the 7th floor platform, 2 more figures waited. They weren't looking up yet, but they were positioned to intercept anyone descending the fire escape. Backup plan, Sophia asked. Ethan studied the building's exterior, noting the pattern of windows ledges and architectural features. There, he pointed to a maintenance ladder that ran along the building's east side. It connects to the parking garage structure next door. That's a 30-foot gap, Angela observed. 25. And there's a utility line we can use for support. Ethan was already calculating angles and distances with the practiced eye of someone who'd crossed more dangerous terrain. You 2 stay here. I'll create a distraction. Absolutely not, Sophia said immediately. We stick together. She's right, Angela agreed. Splitting up is how people die in situations like this. But Ethan was already moving, climbing back up the fire escape toward the 9th floor. The maintenance ladder was accessible from a platform that serviced the building's HVAC systems, and from there he could see the entire tactical situation laid out below him. The men on the 7th floor were definitely professionals, military bearing coordinated positioning communication equipment. But they were focused downward, expecting their targets to continue descending rather than changing direction. Classic tunnel vision. Ethan had seen it cost lives in Afghanistan, when soldiers became so focused on one threat that they missed others developing around them. He made noise deliberately, letting his footsteps ring against the metal stairs as he climbed. The sound echoed off the building's facade, drawing attention upward, just as he'd intended. Both men on the 7th floor looked up automatically, tracking toward the source of the sound. That's when Angela moved. She descended the fire escape with cat-like silence covering the distance to the 7th floor, while the guards were distracted. By the time they realized their mistake, she was already behind them. The first guard went down without a sound, Angela's chokehold cutting off both his air supply and his ability to call for help. The second guard turned just in time to see his partner collapsing, but Angela was already moving, her tactical training evident in every economical motion. "Clear," she called softly. Ethan and Sophia joined her on the 7th floor platform, stepping over the two unconscious forms, professional contractors judging by their equipment and physical conditioning. Someone was spending serious money to find them. "How long before they wake up?" Sophia asked. "Long enough?" Angela replied, already stripping weapons and communication devices from the unconscious men. "But not long enough to get complacent." The rest of the descent proceeded without incident, but Ethan's mind was already working ahead to the next problem. They'd escaped the immediate trap, but that just meant their enemies would adapt and try again. And next time they might not be so lucky. The parking garage that connected to the hotel's fire escape was a maze of concrete pillars and shadowy corners, perfect for ambushes, but also for concealment. Angela led them through it with the confidence of someone who'd scouted multiple escape routes, emerging onto a side street that was busy enough to provide cover, but not so crowded as to restrict movement. "Transportation?" Ethan asked. "2 blocks south," Angela replied. "Safe house with clean vehicles and communication equipment." They moved through Manhattan's morning crowds like ghosts, 3 people who could blend into the urban landscape while remaining hyper-aware of everything around them. Ethan found himself falling back into patrol patterns he'd thought he'd left behind in Afghanistan, automatically noting potential threats, escape routes, and tactical advantages. "You're thinking like a soldier again," Sophia observed as they walked. "Hard to stop once you start," Ethan replied. "Your mind keeps running threat assessments whether you want it to or not." "Is that what's happening now?" Ethan considered the question as they turned onto a quieter side street lined with older apartment buildings. "Now I'm thinking about my daughter, who's probably wondering why her daddy didn't come home last night, like he promised." "We'll get you back to her," Angela said. "But first we need to figure out who these people are and what they really want." The safe house turned out to be a 3rd-floor apartment in a building that had seen better decades. But appearances were deceiving. Angela's key opened a door that revealed a space equipped with enough surveillance and communication equipment to coordinate a small military operation. "Home sweet home," she said, immediately moving to activate various electronic systems. "Or at least home until someone finds this one too." Sophia set up her laptop on a table that was clearly designed for tactical planning, its surface covered with maps, photographs, and technical diagrams. "We need to identify patterns. Who benefits from stopping this technology? Who has the resources to mount this kind of operation? Who's desperate enough to threaten a child?" The questions hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield, each one carrying implications that could reshape their understanding of what they were facing. Ethan found himself thinking about the systematic nature of the attacks, the professional quality of the personnel involved, and the casual way they'd demonstrated their ability to reach his daughter. "It's not just about the technology," he said slowly. "It's about control. Someone wants to make sure that if this energy storage system reaches the market, they're the ones who profit from it. Or they want to make sure it never reaches the market at all," Angela added. "Either way, we're dealing with people who have enough resources to field multiple teams of professional operators." "Government-level resources," Sophia said, "or close to it." The apartment's communication equipment included multiple secure phone lines, and Angela was already working to establish contact with her network of intelligence sources. "I'll reach out to some people, see what chatter there is about energy technology operations. Someone's been hiring a lot of muscle lately, and that kind of activity usually leaves traces." Ethan moved to the window, looking down at the street below. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that decisions made in apartments like this one could affect everything from the price of gasoline to the stability of entire governments. The weight of that responsibility was almost overwhelming. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Lily asking when you'll be home. I told her you're helping a friend with important work. She wants to know if the friend needs soup." The message should have been heartwarming, but instead, it served as a stark reminder of what he was risking by being here. Every moment he spent trying to solve Sophia's problems was another moment that his daughter was potentially in danger. "I need to call home," he said. "Secure line," Angela pointed to a phone on the tactical table. "Scrambled encryption safe to use." "Mrs. Chen answered on the second ring, and in the background, Ethan could hear the familiar sound of Lily practicing piano. The normalcy of it was both comforting and heartbreaking. "Mr. Cross, Lily has been asking about you every hour. She's much better today, wants to show you the song she learned. Can I talk to her?" "Of course, Lily. Your daddy's on the phone." The sound of running feet, then his daughter's voice, bright with excitement. "Daddy, where are you? Mrs. Chen made me kanji and taught me how to fold paper cranes, and I learned a new song on the piano." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I'm sorry I didn't come home last night. The work thing got more complicated than I expected." "Are you helping someone important?" Ethan looked across the room at Sophia, who was deep in conversation with Angela about technical specifications and threat assessments. "Yeah, baby. Someone very important who needs help with a very big problem." "Is it dangerous?" The question caught him off guard, partly because it was so direct, and partly because Lily's tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you sound different. Like when you used to talk to the army people on the phone." Her voice carried the particular insight that children developed when they'd learned to read adult emotions for signs of approaching change. "I'm being very careful, sweetheart. And I'm going to come home just as soon as I can." "Promise?" "I promise." The words felt like another lie that he desperately needed to make true. "Daddy, I love you." "I love you too, Lily. More than all the stars in the sky. And all the fish in the sea. And all the fish in the sea." After he hung up, the apartment felt smaller and more claustrophobic. Angela was studying satellite imagery on one of her computer screens while Sophia worked through financial records and corporate filings. Both women moved with the focused intensity of people who understood that time was running out. "Find anything?" Ethan asked. "Maybe," Angela replied. 3 different private military contractors have been recruiting personnel for unspecified operations in the last 2 weeks. All 3 have ties to energy sector consulting. Which means someone with deep pockets has been assembling teams for operations related to energy technology, Sophia explained. The question is whether it's one client using multiple contractors or multiple clients competing for the same objective. Ethan studied the information displayed on Angela's screens, trying to process the implications. Either way, we're dealing with people who have access to military-grade personnel and equipment, and the willingness to use both against civilians, Angela added grimly. The afternoon stretched into evening as they worked through layers of corporate structures, financial transactions, and intelligence reports. The picture that emerged was complex and troubling, a web of competing interests, all focused on Sophia's technology, with motivations ranging from pure profit to national security to ideological opposition to technological change. Here, Sophia said, finally pointing to a series of financial transfers on her laptop screen. Someone's been moving a lot of money through shell companies based in countries with strict banking secrecy laws. The amounts are consistent with funding multiple private military operations. How much money? Ethan asked. Enough to buy a small army? Angela replied after reviewing the figures. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Who has that kind of resources and the motivation to use them against clean energy technology? Lots of people, Sophia said. Petroleum companies facing stranded assets worth trillions of dollars. Foreign governments whose entire economies depend on energy exports. Defense contractors who profit from resource conflicts. The list of potential enemies is basically everyone with a significant stake in the current energy economy, Angela summarized, which doesn't narrow things down as much as we'd like. As darkness fell over Manhattan, the apartment's surveillance equipment began picking up increased activity in the surrounding area. Angela monitored radio frequencies and digital communications, noting patterns that suggested coordinated movement. They're looking for us, she announced. Multiple teams conducting systematic searches. Someone's running a professional manhunt. How long before they find this place? Ethan asked. Hard to say. Could be hours, could be days. Depends on how good their intelligence network is. Angela began shutting down non-essential equipment and packing portable electronics into a travel bag. But we should assume they'll find us eventually. So we move again. We move again, Sophia confirmed. But first, we need to make contact with someone who might be able to help us identify our enemies. Who? Dr. Elizabeth Warren, not the politician, the physicist, Sophia explained. She's been working on similar energy storage research at MIT, and someone tried to kidnap her 3 days ago. If we can coordinate with her, we might be able to piece together who's behind all this. The plan was simple in concept, but complex in execution. They would travel to Boston, make contact with Dr. Warren, and attempt to coordinate their research and security efforts. But getting there safely would require careful planning and constant vigilance. Road trip, Angela said with dark humor. Should be fun. As they prepared to leave the safe house, Ethan found himself thinking about Lily again, wondering if he was making the right choice by pursuing this path instead of simply grabbing his daughter and disappearing. But the casual way their enemies had demonstrated their reach suggested that running would only delay the inevitable. Second thoughts, Sophia asked, noting his expression. Third and fourth thoughts, Ethan replied. But I don't see any better options. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. These people won't stop until they get what they want, or until someone stops them. And you think we can stop them? I think we have to try. Sophia shouldered her briefcase and checked her phone for messages. Because the alternative is letting them control technology that could change the world. Angela finished her equipment check and moved to the door, listening for sounds in the hallway. Ready to move. Transportation is 1 block north, parked in a 24-hour garage. They left the safe house the way they'd arrived, carefully, quietly, and with constant awareness of their surroundings. The streets of Manhattan at night were a different creature than during the day, filled with different dangers and different opportunities for concealment. As they walked toward their transportation, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Not by the systematic search teams that Angela had detected, but by something more subtle and more patient. The kind of surveillance that waited for targets to make mistakes rather than actively pursuing them. "Contact," Angela said quietly, her voice barely audible. 2 o'clock about 50 meters back. Single individual maintaining distance but matching our pace. Ethan glanced casually in the indicated direction, spotting a figure that could have been any other late-night pedestrian, if not for the professional way he maintained surveillance distance and positioning. "Orders?" he asked. "Keep moving," Angela replied. "Let's see if he's alone or part of a larger team." They continued toward the parking garage, taking a route that included several turns and opportunities to observe their follower. The surveillance was professional, but not invisible. Someone wanted them to know they were being watched, without feeling immediately threatened. "Psychological pressure," Sophia observed. "They want us nervous and making mistakes. Or they want us to lead them to wherever we're going next," Ethan suggested. The parking garage was a concrete maze of shadows and echoing sounds, perfect for either ambushes or losing pursuit. Angela led them to a nondescript sedan that looked like it belonged to any urban commuter, but Ethan noticed the reinforced windows and the slightly lower stance that suggested armor plating. "Expecting trouble?" he asked. "Always," Angela replied, starting the engine. "In this business, paranoia is just another word for proper preparation." As they drove out of Manhattan, heading north toward the interstate that would take them to Boston, Ethan watched the city lights fade in the rearview mirror. Somewhere in that maze of concrete and glass, his daughter was sleeping safely in Mrs. Chen's apartment, trusting that her father would return as he'd promised. The weight of that trust felt heavier than any equipment he'd carried in combat, because this time the stakes weren't just his own life, but the future of the most important person in his world. As the miles passed beneath their wheels, carrying them toward whatever awaited in Boston, Ethan made another silent promise to Lily. He would find a way to end this. He would identify the people who'd threatened her and make sure they could never threaten her again. And when it was over, he would come home to her with the knowledge that she could grow up in a world where innovative technology made things better rather than more dangerous. But first, he had a war to fight, and this time he intended to win it decisively enough that it would never need to be fought again. The highway stretched ahead of them like a ribbon of possibility, carrying 3 people who'd been thrown together by circumstances beyond their control toward a confrontation that could reshape the future of human civilization. In the distance, Boston's lights twinkled like stars, holding secrets that might finally reveal who their real enemies were. And somewhere behind them, in the city, they'd left the hunt continued. The highway unrolled before them like a dark river, carrying them through the night toward Boston and whatever answers Dr. Elizabeth Warren might provide. Angela drove with the steady competence of someone accustomed to high-stakes transportation, her eyes constantly checking mirrors and monitoring the sparse late-night traffic for signs of pursuit. "How well do you know this Dr. Warren?" Ethan asked from the passenger seat, watching the landscape blur past in the darkness. "We've collaborated on research papers, attended the same conferences," Sophia replied from the back seat. "Elizabeth is brilliant, one of the few people in the world who truly understands the quantum mechanics behind energy storage at the molecular level. If anyone can help us figure out who's behind these attacks, it's her." "And you're sure she'll help us?" "I'm sure she'll want to stay alive," Angela interjected. According to the police reports, the attempt on her was more sophisticated than what they tried with Sophia. Professional extraction team inside knowledge of her security protocols, the whole package. Ethan processed this information while monitoring their surroundings through the side mirror. The sedan's armor plating was reassuring, but it also served as a reminder of how dangerous their situation had become. "What makes you think she wasn't successful in escaping?" "Because she called me yesterday," Sophia said quietly. 12 seconds, just long enough to say she was alive and give me coordinates for a meeting location. Then the line went dead. The implications hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Dr. Warren was either in hiding or in captivity, and either scenario suggested that their enemies were escalating their operations beyond simple intimidation tactics. "The coordinates, where do they lead?" "An industrial complex outside Cambridge," Angela replied. "Officially abandoned, but satellite imagery shows recent activity. Could be a safe house, could be a trap." "Your professional opinion." Angela was quiet for a long moment, considering the question, with the careful analysis of someone whose survival had often depended on reading situations correctly. "It feels like bait. Too convenient, too obvious. But sometimes the obvious choice is the right choice." They drove in contemplative silence for the next hour, each lost in their own thoughts about what awaited them in Boston. Ethan found his mind drifting to Lily, wondering what she was dreaming about in Mrs. Chen's apartment. Did children dream about their fathers being heroes, or did they dream about their fathers coming home safe? His phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Chen. "Lily made you a drawing today. Says it's a picture of you helping people who need saving. She wants to give it to you when you get home." The message should have warmed his heart, but instead, it filled him with a cold dread. Children saw too much, understood too much, even when adults tried to protect them from harsh realities. Lily knew he was in danger, and she was processing that knowledge in the way 8-year-olds always did, by drawing pictures and asking questions that cut straight to the heart of things. "Family?" Sophia asked, noticing his expression. "My daughter. She made me a drawing." Ethan showed her the message, surprised by the impulse to share something so personal with someone he barely knew. "She sounds like a remarkable little girl." "She is. Too smart for her own good sometimes." Ethan put the phone away, but the image of Lily sitting at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table with crayons and construction paper stayed with him. "This whole thing started because I couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. Now I'm wondering if that decision is going to cost her everything." "You did the right thing," Angela said firmly. "These people were always going to escalate. At least this way, you have some control over what happens next." "Do we?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're just reacting to whatever they throw at us." "That's about to change," Sophia said, her voice carrying a new note of determination. "Elizabeth and I have been working on this technology for 3 years. We know it better than anyone, and we know what it could mean for the world. It's time to stop running and start fighting back." The industrial complex that Dr. Warren's coordinates led them to was a sprawling collection of brick buildings and concrete loading docks, surrounded by chain-link fencing and warning signs about trespassing. In the darkness, it looked like the kind of place where bad things happened to people who asked too many questions. Angela parked the sedan in a position that offered multiple escape routes, then spent several minutes studying the complex through military-grade binoculars. "Movement in Building 3, second floor. Could be Dr. Warren, could be hostiles waiting for us to show up. Heat signatures. At least 4 people, maybe more. Hard to tell from this distance." Angela lowered the binoculars and looked at her companions. "We could wait for daylight, try to get a better read on the situation. Or we could acknowledge that waiting just gives them more time to prepare whatever reception they have planned," Ethan countered. "If Dr. Warren is in there, she's been waiting for help for over a day. If it's a trap, they already know we're coming." Sophia checked her phone for any additional messages from Dr. Warren, but the screen remained blank. "She wouldn't have given us these coordinates unless she thought it was safe." Elizabeth is too smart to lead us into an obvious ambush. Unless someone's forcing her to, Angela pointed out grimly. The tactical situation was a classic dilemma: insufficient intelligence, multiple possible scenarios, and time pressure that prevented adequate reconnaissance. Ethan had faced similar decisions in Afghanistan, where waiting for perfect information often meant missing opportunities entirely. We go in, Chung, he decided, but we go in smart. Overwatch position, multiple entry points, and a hard time limit. If we don't make contact with Dr. Warren in 30 minutes, we extract regardless of what we've found. Angela nodded approvingly. Spoken like someone who's done this before. They spent the next 20 minutes planning their approach, using the sedan's tactical equipment to map the complex and identify potential threats. The building Dr. Warren had indicated was accessible through 3 different entry points, each offering different advantages and risks. I'll take the main entrance, Ethan said. Most direct route, but also the most obvious. Angela, can you cover the service entrance on the east side? What about me? Sophia asked. You stay with the car engine running, ready to extract us if things go sideways. Ethan saw her start to protest and held up a hand. This isn't about your courage, it's about keeping our most valuable asset alive long enough to matter. The technology is what's valuable, not me personally. Right now, you're the only person who fully understands the technology, Angela pointed out. That makes you irreplaceable until we can get it to market or expose whoever's trying to stop us. The complex's perimeter fence was more for show than security, designed to keep out casual trespassers rather than determined infiltrators. Angela cut through the chain link with practiced efficiency, while Ethan provided overwatch scanning for sentries or automated security systems. Clear, she whispered into her radio. Moving to position. Building 3 loomed against the night sky, like a monument to industrial decay. Its broken windows and graffiti-covered walls speaking of years of abandonment. But as Ethan approached the main entrance, he noticed subtle signs that the building wasn't as empty as it appeared. Fresh tire tracks in the dust, recently disturbed debris, and the faint glow of artificial light leaking from the upper floors. The main door was unlocked, which set off every alarm bell in his military-trained mind. In hostile territory, unlocked doors were usually invitations to carefully prepared killing zones. Too easy, he murmured into his radio. Agreed. Angela's voice crackled back. But the alternative is assuming Dr. Warren is already dead and walking away. Ethan pushed through the door and immediately moved to cover his back against a concrete pillar that provided protection from multiple angles. The building's interior was a maze of machinery, conveyor belts, and industrial equipment that had been abandoned when the factory closed. Perfect terrain for ambushes, but also for concealment. Movement second floor, Angela reported. Single individual moving toward the northeast corner. Dr. Warren, can't tell from here, but whoever it is, they're not trying to hide. Ethan began working his way through the ground floor, using the industrial equipment for cover, while maintaining sight lines to potential threat positions. The building had the particular silence of abandoned places, broken only by the distant sound of settling metal and his own carefully controlled breathing. The stairwell to the second floor was exposed and tactically dangerous, offering no cover and limited escape routes. But it was also the most direct path to wherever Dr. Warren might be waiting, and time was becoming a critical factor. Going up, he whispered into the radio. Copy. I'm moving to the east stairwell, will parallel your ascent. The second floor was laid out like an office complex with cubicles and conference rooms that had been stripped of everything valuable years ago. But in the northeast corner, light spilled from beneath a closed door, and Ethan could hear the faint sound of conversation. He approached the door with weapon drawn, though he hoped desperately that he wouldn't need to use it. Outside, Sophia was waiting in the car, probably checking her phone every few seconds for updates. Back in Brooklyn, Lily was sleeping peacefully, trusting that her father would come home safely. "Dr. Warren," he called softly through the door. The conversation inside stopped abruptly. After a moment, a woman's voice responded, "Who's asking?" "Ethan Cross. I'm here with Sophia Lane." "Prove it." The challenge was fair. Anyone could have overheard their conversation or intercepted their communications. Ethan thought quickly about information that only Sophia would have shared with her research partner. "Sophia said you called her yesterday. 12 seconds coordinates for this location, then the line went dead. She's been worried about your molecular crystalline matrix research." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and intelligent eyes that held the same haunted quality Ethan had seen in Sophia's face. Dr. Elizabeth Warren looked like someone who'd been running on adrenaline and caffeine for days. "Where is Sophia?" "Safe. Outside with our security specialist." Ethan holstered his weapon, noting that Dr. Warren wasn't alone in the room. 2 other people sat at a makeshift table covered with technical documents and laptop computers. "Dr. Warren, we need to get you out of here. The people who tried to take you, they're still looking." "I know. That's why we're here." She gestured to her companions, both younger scientists, who looked like they'd been through their own version of the past few days' events. "Meet Dr. James Kim from Stanford and Dr. Sarah Rodriguez from Caltech. They've been working on similar energy storage research, and they've all had attempts made on their lives in the past week." The scope of the conspiracy was suddenly much clearer. This wasn't just about Sophia's technology, it was about suppressing an entire field of research that threatened to revolutionize global energy markets. "How many others?" Ethan asked. "We've identified at least 8 researchers who've been targeted," Dr. Kim replied. "Some successfully kidnapped, some killed in apparent accidents, others forced into hiding like us. Someone's conducting a systematic campaign to eliminate everyone working on advanced energy storage," Dr. Rodriguez added. "The question is, who has the resources and motivation to mount an operation this extensive?" Angela's voice crackled through Ethan's radio. "We've got company, multiple vehicles approaching the complex, moving with tactical coordination." "Time to go," Ethan announced. "Can you travel?" "We've been ready for days," Dr. Warren replied, already gathering documents and shutting down computers. "Everything we need is portable." The evacuation proceeded with military efficiency, but even as they moved through the building toward the extraction point, Ethan could hear the sound of vehicles surrounding the complex. Whoever had found them was deploying enough personnel to seal off all escape routes. "South exit." Angela's voice was tight with tension. "It's our only option, but they'll be covering it soon." They reached the ground floor just as floodlights illuminated the building's exterior, turning night into harsh, artificial day. Through the windows, Ethan could see figures in tactical gear setting up a perimeter around the complex. "Professional military contractors, Dr. Warren observed with surprising calm. "Same equipment and tactics they used when they tried to take me at MIT." "How many teams are we looking at?" Dr. Kim asked. "At least 3, Angela replied over the radio. "Maybe more. They're not taking any chances this time." The south exit led to a loading dock that offered some concealment, but beyond it lay open ground that would leave them exposed to multiple firing positions. Getting to the car would require crossing approximately 100 meters of terrain that offered no cover. "Suppressing fire," Ethan said into his radio. "Can you provide distraction from your position?" "Negative. I'm pinned down by overwatch positions on the east side." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly, and Ethan found himself falling back on lessons learned in some of the worst fighting in Afghanistan. When you couldn't go around an obstacle, sometimes you had to go through it. Stay close, stay low, and follow my lead, he told the three scientists. When I say move, you run for the car and don't stop for anything. What about you? Dr. Warren asked. I'll make sure you have a clear path. Ethan kicked open the loading dock door and immediately drew fire from at least 2 positions. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like deadly lightning, and bullets sparked off the concrete around him. But the tactical contractors had made a classic mistake. They were so focused on the obvious exit that they'd left gaps in their coverage. Now, he shouted, laying down suppressing fire with a weapon he'd taken from one of the unconscious hotel attackers. The 3 scientists ran like their lives depended on it, which they probably did. Dr. Warren moved with surprising speed for someone her age, while Dr. Kim and Dr. Rodriguez flanked her on either side. Sophia had the car running with the doors open, ready to extract them the moment they reached safety. But as they crossed the open ground, additional muzzle flashes erupted from concealed positions. These weren't warning shots, or attempts to wound someone had given orders to eliminate all witnesses to their operation. Angela, Ethan called into his radio. Need that distraction now. The response came in the form of an explosion that lit up the eastern side of the complex, followed by the distinctive sound of automatic weapons fire. Angela had apparently found a way out of her pinned position and was creating chaos among the tactical teams. The distraction was enough to get the scientists to the car, but as Ethan provided covering fire for their escape, he realized that someone was specifically targeting him rather than just trying to stop the group's escape. The bullets were too accurate, too persistent, too focused on his position. They wanted him dead. The revelation came with the clarity that only emerged in combat situations. Someone saw him as a specific threat that needed to be eliminated. Not just a witness or an inconvenience, but a direct danger to their operations. "Get them out of here," he shouted to Sophia as he continued firing. "Don't wait for me." "Like hell," Angela's voice crackled through the radio. 30 seconds, then we all extract together. But 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes when professional killers were systematically eliminating your cover options. Ethan found himself trapped behind a concrete barrier that was steadily being chipped away by accurate rifle fire. That's when Dr. Warren made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of getting in the car as ordered, she grabbed something from her bag and ran back toward the building. Not toward Ethan's position, but toward a different section of the loading dock where industrial equipment was still stored. "Elizabeth, what are you doing?" Sophia screamed from the car. "Buying us time," Dr. Warren shouted back, working frantically with whatever device she'd retrieved from her bag. The explosion that followed wasn't large, but it was precisely placed. Dr. Warren had somehow rigged an improvised explosive that brought down a section of the building's facade, creating a wall of debris between the tactical teams and their targets. "Move, move, move!" Ethan called, using the confusion to break from his position and sprint toward the car. They made it out of the complex with bullets still flying behind them, Angela driving like a professional rally racer, while everyone else tried to process what had just happened. Dr. Warren sat in the back seat with a satisfied expression, as if bringing down buildings was just another aspect of advanced scientific research. "Plastique explosive," she explained when she saw their questioning looks. "Industrial grade, readily available if you know where to look. Physics teaches you a lot about how things fall down." "Remind me never to get on your bad side," Angela said with grudging admiration. As they put distance between themselves and the industrial complex, Ethan tried to make sense of what they'd learned and what it meant for their situation. The conspiracy was larger than any of them had imagined, involving coordinated attacks on researchers across multiple institutions and geographic locations. "We need to go public," Dr. Rodriguez said from the crowded back seat. "The only way to stop this is to make the technology so widely known that killing us becomes pointless. Agreed, Dr. Kim added. But we need a platform that can't be suppressed or controlled. Something with enough visibility that the story can't be buried. Sophia was already working on her phone, typing with the urgency of someone who understood that time was running out. I have contacts at MIT, at the Department of Energy, at several major news organizations. If we coordinate the release properly, we can make this public knowledge within hours. And then what? Ethan asked. These people have already demonstrated they're willing to kill to suppress this technology. What makes you think they won't just escalate to more dramatic measures? Because at some point, the cost of suppression exceeds the value of what you're trying to suppress, Dr. Warren replied. Right now, they can justify killing a few scientists to protect trillion-dollar industries. But if the technology is already public, killing us becomes revenge rather than strategy. The logic was sound, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial about their enemy's motivations. The systematic nature of the attacks. The professional quality of the personnel involved the willingness to threaten children. It all suggested an organization with resources and ruthlessness that went beyond simple corporate competition. Where are we going? Angela asked, checking the mirrors for signs of pursuit. Cambridge, Sophia replied. MIT has secure communication facilities and enough academic prestige that our announcement will carry weight. Plus, Dr. Warren still has access to her laboratory there. Assuming it hasn't been compromised, Dr. Warren said grimly. After what happened at the industrial complex, we have to assume they know about all our previous safe locations. The drive to Cambridge passed in tense silence, everyone lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. Ethan found himself thinking about Lily again, wondering if she was having nightmares about her father not coming home. Children were remarkably resilient, but they also absorbed more stress than adults realized. His phone buzzed with another message from Mrs. Chen. Lily woke up asking about you. I told her you're still helping your friend, but that you'll be home soon. She wanted me to tell you she's being very brave. The message broke something inside Ethan's chest. His 8-year-old daughter was being brave because she understood on some level that her father was in danger. She was processing that knowledge with the same matter-of-fact courage that had helped her survive her mother's death. I need to end this, he said quietly. We all do, Sophia replied. But ending it means taking risks that could make things worse before they get better. Your daughter, Dr. Warren asked, having overheard the phone conversation. 8 years old. She's with a neighbor, but she knows something's wrong. Ethan looked out at the dark landscape passing by the car windows. I joined the army to protect people, to make sure children could grow up safe. Now I'm risking my own child's safety to protect technology that could change the world. Children understand more than we give them credit for, Dr. Warren said gently. My granddaughter is about your daughter's age, and she once told me that sometimes adults have to do scary things so that kids don't have to be scared anymore. The wisdom of children, filtered through the perspective of someone who'd spent decades in academia, carried a weight that surprised Ethan. Maybe Lily did understand, on some level, that her father was fighting to make sure she could grow up in a world where innovative technology made things better rather than more dangerous. MIT's campus at night was a mixture of classical academic architecture and cutting-edge research facilities, connected by tree-lined paths that had been walked by some of the most brilliant minds in human history. Dr. Warren's laboratory was located in a building that looked more like a fortress than a research facility, with security systems that reflected the sensitive nature of the work conducted inside. This should be safe, she said as they approached the building's main entrance. Multiple layers of security, faculty ID required for access, and graduate students working at all hours. Hard to mount a covert operation here without attracting attention. But as they reached the entrance, Angela held up a hand for silence. Something's wrong. What? Too quiet. Even late at night, there should be more activity around a research building like this. Angela studied the surrounding area with practiced eyes. And the security cameras have been redirected away from the main entrance. The subtle wrongness of the situation became more apparent as they approached the building. Lights that should have been on were dark doors that should have been locked, stood slightly ajar, and the normal background sounds of a working research facility were absent. They got here first, Dr. Warren said with resignation. Probably hours ago. We should leave, Dr. Kim said nervously. Find another location, regroup somewhere safe. But Sophia was already moving toward the entrance, her expression determined. Everything we need to go public is in that laboratory. Research data, communication equipment, contacts in the media and government. If we walk away now, we're back to running and hiding. And if we go in there, we might be walking into a trap, Angela pointed out. Then we spring the trap on our terms instead of theirs, Ethan said, surprising himself with the decision. But we do it smart. Limited exposure, multiple escape routes, and a hard time limit. The next 30 minutes would determine whether they could expose the conspiracy threatening them, or whether they would become its latest victims. As they prepared to enter the darkened research facility, Ethan thought about Lily's drawing a picture of her father, helping people who needed saving. Maybe it was time to find out if he could live up to his daughter's image of him as a hero. But first, they had to survive what awaited them in the shadows of one of America's most prestigious academic institutions, where the future of energy technology hung in the balance between those who would protect it and those who would destroy it. The building's silence felt like a held breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious from the confrontation that was about to unfold. The laboratory building's entrance yielded to Dr. Warren's faculty keycard, but the electronic beep that should have accompanied access was absent. Someone had disabled the building's security systems with surgical precision, leaving them to navigate through corridors that felt more like the arteries of a sleeping beast than the halls of academic research. Angela moved, point her weapon drawn, and her movements fluid with practiced caution. Behind her, Ethan shepherded the three scientists while maintaining rear security, every shadow and doorway a potential threat. The building's emergency lighting cast everything in sickly green hues that made familiar spaces feel alien and menacing. "Third floor," Dr. Warren whispered. "My lab has independent power systems and communication equipment that should still be functional." They climbed the stairwell in tactical formation, each landing offering new opportunities for ambush. But the building remained eerily silent, as if their enemies had simply vanished after neutralizing the security systems. "Too easy," Angela murmured as they reached the third floor. "Either they're very confident in whatever they have planned, or they want us to reach the laboratory." "Both possibilities lead to the same conclusion," Ethan replied. "We proceed, but we assume everything is compromised." Dr. Warren's laboratory was a testament to cutting-edge research filled with equipment that probably cost more than most people's houses. But someone had been there before them, not to destroy or steal, but to observe. Tiny surveillance devices had been placed with care, positioned to monitor every corner of the room. "They've been watching," Dr. Rodriguez observed, spotting one of the nearly invisible cameras. "For how long?" Dr. Kim asked. "Weeks, probably months," Angela replied systematically, locating and disabling the surveillance equipment. "Someone's been very interested in Dr. Warren's research progress." But as they worked to secure the laboratory, Sophia made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden behind a false panel in Dr. Warren's desk was a device that looked like a small tablet computer, but its screen displayed information that made no sense in the context of academic research. Elizabeth, what is this? Dr. Warren looked at the device with an expression that mixed surprise and resignation. Insurance, she said quietly, or blackmail, depending on your perspective. The screen showed financial records, communication intercepts, and personnel files that painted a picture of the conspiracy they'd been fighting. But these weren't the random intelligence gathering that might be expected from corporate espionage. This was systematic documentation of a coordinated effort that reached into the highest levels of government and industry. You've been investigating them, Ethan realized, for months, ever since the first researcher disappeared. Dr. Warren took the device and began calling up files with practiced efficiency. I realized that our energy storage research wasn't just threatening to disrupt markets, it was threatening to destabilize entire geopolitical structures. The files revealed a web of connections that explained everything they'd experienced. Oil companies coordinating with defense contractors, foreign governments working with domestic political figures, environmental groups being manipulated by the same interests they thought they were fighting. It's not about stopping the technology, Sophia said, as she studied the information. It's about controlling who gets access to it first. Exactly. Unlimited energy storage doesn't just change how we power our cars and homes, Dr. Warren explained. It changes which countries have strategic advantages, which corporations control global supply chains, which political movements can sustain themselves indefinitely. Angela had finished her security sweep and was now monitoring the building's approaches through the laboratory's windows. We've got movement in the parking area. Multiple vehicles coordinated approach. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. But as they prepared to transmit Dr. Warren's intelligence to media contacts and government officials, Ethan's phone rang. The caller ID showed Mrs. Chen's number, but the voice that answered wasn't hers. Mr. Cross, this is Detective Sarah Martinez, NYPD. I'm calling about your daughter. The world stopped moving. Every sound in the laboratory faded to background noise as Ethan processed words that no parent ever wanted to hear. What about my daughter? She's safe, Mr. Cross, but there was an incident at your building tonight. Someone attempted to break into the apartment where she was staying. Mrs. Chen was injured, and your daughter is currently in protective custody. The phone nearly slipped from Ethan's suddenly numb fingers. How injured? Stable condition at Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. She fought off the intruders long enough for neighbors to call 911. The detective's voice carried professional sympathy mixed with urgency. Mr. Cross, your daughter is asking for you, and we need to talk about why someone would try to kidnap an 8-year-old girl. Ethan looked around the laboratory at the 3 scientists who were depending on him to help them expose a conspiracy that threatened to reshape global civilization. Then he thought about Lily sitting in some sterile police station, probably terrified and wondering why her father wasn't there to protect her. I have to go, he said. Ethan, wait. Sophia grabbed his arm. If you leave now, they win. They've escalated to targeting your daughter specifically to force you out of the equation. My daughter is more important than your technology. Your daughter's future depends on this technology being released properly, Dr. Warren interjected. If these people gain control of unlimited energy storage, they'll have the power to reshape society in whatever image serves their interests. Is that the world you want her to grow up in? The moral calculus was brutal and immediate. Save his daughter now or save the world she would inherit. Protect the person he loved most, or protect the principle that had made him a soldier in the first place. Angela's voice cut through his internal struggle. They're moving. Multiple teams surrounding the building. We've got maybe 5 minutes before this becomes a firefight. Then we transmit everything now, Sophia decided. Broadcast Dr. Warren's intelligence to every media outlet, government agency, and academic institution simultaneously. Make it impossible to suppress. The communication equipment is set up for secure transmission. Dr. Warren said, already activating systems that looked more like mission control than university research. But it'll take time to reach everyone on our contact list. Time we don't have, Angela observed, watching tactical teams take positions around the building through high-powered binoculars. That's when Ethan made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Instead of choosing between his daughter and the mission, he found a way to serve both. "How long do you need for the transmission?" he asked. 20 minutes for full distribution, Dr. Warren replied. "Then I'll buy you 20 minutes. Ethan moved to the laboratory's equipment storage, looking for anything that could be repurposed for tactical use. "Angela, can you provide overwatch from this position?" "What are you planning?" "Something that'll keep their attention focused on me instead of what you're doing up here." Ethan found what he was looking for: industrial chemicals and equipment that could be improvised into weapons. "Dr. Warren, that explosive you used at the industrial complex. Can you make more?" "Ethan, you can't take on an entire army by yourself," Sophia protested. "I'm not trying to win a war. I'm trying to buy time." He looked at each of them in turn, these brilliant people who'd been thrown together by circumstances beyond their control. 20 minutes. Then you broadcast everything, and this whole nightmare becomes public knowledge. And then what happens to you? Ethan thought about Lily sitting in a police station and wondering when her daddy would come home. "Then I go get my daughter and find out if we managed to make the world a little bit safer for her." The next 20 minutes unfolded with the compressed intensity of combat, but also with the clarity of purpose that Ethan hadn't felt since leaving the army. He moved through the building's lower floors like a ghost made of violence, using improvised explosives and misdirection to create the illusion of a much larger defensive force. The tactical teams were professional, but they were also operating under constraints that limited their effectiveness. This was an academic facility in the middle of Cambridge, not a battlefield in Afghanistan. Excessive collateral damage would attract attention that their employers couldn't afford. Ethan used those constraints against them, forcing them to advance cautiously through corridors that he'd turned into maze of obstacles and hazards. Every delayed minute was another step closer to exposing the conspiracy that had threatened his daughter. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Dr. Warren's communication equipment was sending terabytes of data to recipients around the world. Financial records that exposed the conspiracy's funding sources. Personnel files that revealed which government officials were compromised. Technical specifications that made suppressing the energy storage technology impossible. Transmission at 60% passion. Warren reported over their improvised communication system. "But I'm detecting jamming attempts. Someone's trying to block our signals." "Can you overcome it?" Sophia asked while monitoring news feeds on her laptop. "For now, but they're adapting quickly. Professional electronic warfare capabilities." Angela provided commentary from her overwatch position. "Ethan's got them focused on the building's south side. They think they're pursuing a larger force through the mechanical systems. But as the transmission approached completion, their enemies made a tactical decision that changed everything. Instead of continuing to pursue Ethan through the building's maze-like interior, they simply started bringing it down around him. The explosions began on the first floor, precisely placed charges that brought down load-bearing walls with surgical accuracy. Someone had decided that eliminating the witnesses was more important than preserving the facility. "They're demolishing the building," Angela reported with professional calm that didn't quite hide her concern. "Ethan, you need to extract now." "Transmission status." Ethan's voice crackled through their radios, distorted by the sound of collapsing infrastructure. 85% complete, Dr. Warren replied. But if the building comes down, we lose everything. Then finish it. The next few minutes tested everyone's limits. Ethan fought his way through corridors that were literally falling apart around him, while 3 floors above Dr. Warren's equipment transmitted the final pieces of evidence that would expose the conspiracy threatening them. When the transmission finally completed, Dr. Warren allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before beginning the process of wiping the laboratory's systems to prevent their enemies from recovering any useful intelligence. "It's done," she announced. "Every major news organization, government agency, and academic institution in the world now has complete documentation of who's been trying to suppress clean energy research." "And now we get out of here," Angela said, gathering essential equipment while monitoring Ethan's progress through the building. But their extraction was complicated by the same demolition charges that had been meant to eliminate them. The building's stairwells were blocked by debris, and the elevators had been disabled when the power systems were targeted. "Fire escape on the north side," Sophia suggested, remembering the layout from their earlier reconnaissance. "Compromised," Angela replied. "They've got marksmen covering all the obvious exit points." That's when Dr. Warren revealed another aspect of her apparently extensive preparations for this exact scenario. "Steam tunnels," she said, opening a maintenance access panel that most people would never have noticed. "They connect all the buildings on this part of campus. We can reach the river from here." The tunnels were hot, cramped, and filled with the kind of industrial machinery that could easily kill someone who didn't know what they were doing. But Dr. Warren navigated them with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades working in similar environments. "How do you know about these?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, as they crawled through a passage that felt barely wide enough for human transit. 40 years at this university," Dr. Warren replied. "You learn where all the bodies are buried, literally in some cases." They emerged from the tunnel system near the Charles River, about half a mile from the laboratory building that was now partially collapsed and crawling with emergency responders. In the distance, sirens wailed as Cambridge police and fire departments responded to what appeared to be a terrorist attack on one of America's most prestigious universities. "Think they bought it?" Angela asked, watching the emergency response through binoculars. "Bought what?" Sophia was monitoring news feeds on her phone, watching as the story they'd transmitted began to spread across global media networks. "That we were killed in the building collapse," Ethan explained finally, catching up with the group after his harrowing escape through the demolition zone. "If our enemies think we're dead, they might stop hunting us long enough for your intelligence dump to take effect." The strategy was sound, but it also meant they couldn't return to their normal lives until the conspiracy was fully exposed and dismantled. For Ethan, that meant he couldn't go home to Lily until it was safe to do so. But as they watched the news coverage unfold on Sophia's phone, it became clear that their gambit was working. The financial records Dr. Warren had transmitted were already being verified by investigative journalists. Government officials were calling for congressional hearings. Stock prices for major energy companies were in freefall as markets processed the implications of the leaked technology specifications. "It's working," Dr. Kim said with amazement. "They can't suppress this anymore." "No," Angela agreed, "but they can still try to eliminate us before we can testify about what we know." The next 72 hours were a blur of safe houses, secure communications, and coordination with federal law enforcement agencies that were finally taking their situation seriously. The conspiracy Dr. Warren had documented reached into the highest levels of government and industry, requiring careful navigation to identify which officials could be trusted. But gradually, the picture became clear. The systematic attacks on energy researchers had been coordinated by a consortium of interests that included petroleum companies, defense contractors, and foreign governments, all working together to prevent technology that would fundamentally alter global power structures. The investigation that followed would take months to complete, but the immediate threat to Lily's safety ended when the conspiracy's key figures were arrested in coordinated raids across multiple countries. The professional killers they'd hired were either captured or fled to jurisdictions that didn't cooperate with international law enforcement. When Ethan finally walked into the Brooklyn police station, where his daughter had been waiting, he found her sitting at a detective's desk, helping process paperwork with the serious concentration that she brought to all her activities. "Daddy?" She launched herself into his arms with the force of someone who'd been holding back tears for days. "Mrs. Chen is okay. The doctors said she's very tough and that she fought the bad men like a hero, just like you did," Ethan said, holding his daughter with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd almost lost everything that mattered. "I'm so proud of how brave you were." "I knew you'd come back," Lily said, with the absolute certainty that only children possessed. "You promised you were helping people who needed saving, and I knew that was important work." 6 months later, Ethan stood in the kitchen of a house nestled in the foothills outside Denver, making breakfast while Lily practiced piano in the living room, and their new dog, a rescue German shepherd named Charlie, chased sunlight across the hardwood floors. The house was a gift from Sophia, part of the relocation assistance she'd promised, but it had become something more than just a safe place to live. It had become home. Sophia's company, Lane Dynamics, had gone public with their energy storage technology to global acclaim, but more importantly, they'd done so safely. The exposure of the conspiracy had made it impossible for the old energy interests to suppress the technology through violence, forcing them to compete in the marketplace instead. Dr. Warren had returned to MIT as something of a celebrity, using her newfound fame to advocate for open scientific research and international cooperation. Dr. Kim and Dr. Rodriguez had established a joint research program that was already producing the next generation of clean energy innovations. Angela had disappeared back into whatever shadow world intelligence professionals inhabited when they weren't saving scientists from international conspiracies. But she'd left behind a phone number and a promise to respond if they ever needed help again. "Daddy, someone's here," Lily called from the living room, where she'd spotted a familiar silver Tesla pulling into their driveway. Sophia emerged from the car carrying blueprints and wearing the kind of smile that suggested good news. She'd taken to visiting every few weeks ostensibly to discuss security matters, but really to check on the family that had risked everything to help her. "How's the future of energy storage?" Ethan asked as he opened the door. "Bright, literally." Sophia spread her blueprints across the kitchen table, revealing plans for a manufacturing facility that would bring her technology to market faster than anyone had thought possible. "We're going to change the world, Ethan. Cars that never need to be recharged, homes that can store solar power for months, entire communities that are completely independent of traditional power grids. And the people who tried to stop you, serving prison sentences or hiding in countries that don't have extradition treaties. Either way, they're not a threat anymore." Sophia looked around the kitchen, noting the signs of a family that was finally secure in their safety. "How's Lily adjusting to Colorado?" "She loves it. Already made friends at school, joined the junior astronomy club, and convinced me to adopt Charlie." Ethan gestured toward the living room, where his daughter was now reading to the dog from one of her science books. "She says she wants to be an engineer like you when she grows up." "Smart girl. She could probably teach me a few things about courage." As the afternoon wore on, they talked about the future, both the technological revolution that Sophia's work would bring, and the more personal question of what came next for a former soldier who'd discovered that some battles were worth fighting, even when they weren't officially sanctioned by any government. "I've been thinking about your offer," Ethan said finally. Sophia had offered him the position of Chief of Security for Lane Dynamics, a role that would let him use his skills to protect innovation instead of destroying enemies. It was meaningful work with good pay, and it would allow him to be present for Lily's childhood in ways that his military service never had. And, "I accept, but I have conditions." "Name them." "Lily comes first. Always. If there's ever a conflict between what's good for the company and what's good for my daughter, she wins." "Agreed. What else?" "We make sure this technology really does make the world better. Not just more profitable, but actually better for people like Mrs. Chen and the teachers at Lily's school and all the families who are struggling to make ends meet." Sophia extended her hand with a smile that carried genuine warmth instead of just professional courtesy. "Mr. Cross, I think you're going to make an excellent head of security." That evening, after Sophia had returned to her hotel and Lily had gone to bed with Charlie sleeping on the floor beside her, Ethan sat on the front porch of their new home and watched the sun set over the Rocky Mountains. The view was spectacular, but what made it meaningful was the knowledge that his daughter was safe, that the world was becoming a little bit better through the work they'd done, and that tomorrow would bring new challenges that were worth facing. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, who had recovered fully from her injuries and become something of a neighborhood hero in Brooklyn. "Lily sent me a picture of your new house. Looks like heaven. She says the dog knows how to play piano now." Ethan smiled and typed back, "Charlie's very talented. We'll have to visit soon so you can meet him." "I'd like that. Take care of our girl. Always." As darkness settled over the Colorado landscape, Ethan thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a restaurant parking lot in Manhattan to a laboratory at MIT to a home in the mountains where his daughter could grow up safe and happy. It had been a war worth fighting, with casualties and victories, and the kind of moral complexities that made simple answers impossible. But in the end, the most important battle hadn't been against international conspiracies or professional killers. It had been the fight to create a world where children like Lily could pursue their dreams without fear, where innovation could flourish without violence, and where ordinary people could build extraordinary lives through courage, determination, and the willingness to help others when help was needed. Inside the house, Lily was probably dreaming about space exploration, or engineering marvels, or the next book she wanted to read. Charlie was undoubtedly dreaming about whatever dogs dreamed about when they'd found their forever families. And somewhere in Boston, brilliant scientists were working late into the night to turn revolutionary technology into practical solutions that would benefit millions of people. The war was over. They had won. And tomorrow, Ethan Cross would begin the most important mission of his life, being a father to a remarkable little girl in a world that was finally safe enough for her to become whatever she chose to be. The stars above Colorado burned with the same light they'd cast over every battlefield he'd ever known. But tonight, they seemed different somehow. Less distant, more hopeful, filled with possibilities that hadn't existed before brave people decided to fight for a better future. And in the morning, there would be pancakes shaped like animals' piano lessons that included the dog, and the kind of ordinary miracles that made all the extraordinary risks worthwhile. It was, Ethan thought, as he headed inside to check on his sleeping daughter one more time, exactly the kind of happy ending that was worth fighting for.